7 months had passed since my unexpected arrival in this strange realm. Through my studies with Kerala, I had learned that this world was called Ryyah, a name rooted in ancient meaning. In the old elven tongue, it roughly translated to home, a concept that felt both comforting and alienating as I continued to navigate this unfamiliar landscape. The grand library was bathed in the soft, golden light of a lazy afternoon. Dust particles shimmered in the sunbeams, streaming through high-arched windows, dancing in the air like tiny constellations. The room smelled of old parchment and leather, with the faint hint of ink lingering in the atmosphere. Rows of ancient tomes stretched toward the ceiling, their spines worn from centuries of use. The silence was almost reverent, broken only by the soft rustle of turning pages and the occasional creak of wooden shelves settling under their weighty burden. As I studied the weathered volumes on elven history, the rich tapestry of Ryyah's past unfolded before me. I discovered that 4 main variants of elves existed, each aligned with a fundamental element: fire, ice, shadow, and light. The eastern continent, where I now found myself, was primarily inhabited by 2 of these variants, the Ice Elves and the High Elves. My fingers traced the intricate script as I read about the Wild Elves, whose isolation and unique customs had always intrigued me. Unlike the other elven races that had developed their cultures in relative isolation during a period known as the Shadowing of the World, the Wild Elves had taken a different path. The Western Wood Elves, I learned, had a fascinating history of conquest and adaptation. Originally Northern Forest Elves, a tribal variant of the Wild Elves, they had been assimilated as a client state of the High Elven Kingdom. According to their legends, an elven warlord had risen to prominence as a frontier battle lord during a time of hostility between the Ice Elves and the High Elves. As I delved deeper into the text, the complexity of elven governance began to unfold before me. This warlord's descendants had grown in power and influence, eventually creating friction with the established houses. To resolve the tension, the battle lord's lineage was granted permission to establish a new kingdom in the eastern forests. This new realm became known as the Kingdom of the Western Wood Elves. The establishment of this new kingdom had far-reaching consequences. It displaced many of the original native northern forest elves, splitting them into 2 distinct tribes. One group was absorbed into the new Western Wood Elven Kingdom, while the other banded together to become the Eastern Wood Elves, settling across the river in the east. I closed the book, my mind spinning with new revelations. The weight of history in this world was palpable, each page revealing layers upon layers of complex alliances, conflicts, and cultural shifts. It was a stark reminder of how much I still had to learn, how far I still had to go to truly understand my new surroundings. As I sat there, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of ages, I couldn't help but reflect on the complexity of history and politics that had shaped Ryyah. It was a world of intricate relationships and long-held traditions, where the actions of the past echoed through centuries to influence the present. The soft light filtering through the windows began to dim, signaling the approach of evening. I stood stretching my stiff muscles and made my way back to my chambers. The corridors of the citadel were quiet at this hour, the stone walls cool to the touch as I traced my way through the familiar paths. Once in my room, I settled at my desk, preparing to review my notes on elven history. The scent of fresh ink filled the air as I dipped my quill, ready to transcribe the day's learnings. However, before I could begin, a sharp knock at my chamber door jolted me from my concentration. I paused, quill hovering over parchment, and closed my eyes, extending my developing magical perception, an ability I still struggled to fully comprehend. I sensed the familiar energy signature of Ingvar, the dwarf who had become my reluctant guardian. His presence pulsed beyond the door, a steady grounding force amidst the swirling energies of the citadel. With a sigh, I rose to answer, expecting another trip to the library. However, as I opened the door, I was met with an unexpected sight. Ingvar stood there, his usual scowl deepened by what appeared to be concern. He was flanked by 2 sentinels I didn't recognize, their polished armor gleaming in the torchlight that flickered along the corridor.
"The king has summoned you,"
Ingvar grunted, his gruff voice betraying a hint of surprise.
"An unofficial audience. You're to come with us immediately."
My pulse quickened at his words. After months of relative peace and study, this sudden summons sent a ripple of concern through me. I nodded, keeping my voice steady as I replied, "Of course. Just give me a moment to prepare." As I hurriedly pulled on my boots and straightened my clothes, my mind raced with possibilities. Had I done something wrong? Was my time of peace coming to an end? The uncertainty gnawed at me as I followed Ingvar and the escort through the winding corridors of the citadel. The stone beneath our feet echoed with each step, the sound seeming to amplify my growing unease. Tapestries depicting ancient battles and legendary figures adorned the walls, their rich colors muted in the dim light of the evening. The air grew cooler as we descended through levels of the citadel I had never seen before, carrying with it the faint scent of damp stone and distant hearth fires. After a journey that felt much longer than the 10 minutes it likely took, we arrived at a part of the citadel that was entirely new to me. The guards ushered me towards an ornate door, its surface carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move in the flickering torchlight. As the door swung open, I found myself entering what appeared to be a private study, a miniature version of the grand library I'd come to know so well. Mahogany shelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound tomes whose spines glinted with gold leaf in the warm light. An expansive desk occupied the center of the room, flanked by comfortable-looking chairs reminiscent of Roman design. The gathering's intimacy struck me as I entered. King Addlin himself sat behind the desk, his robust half-elven appearance somehow more imposing in the study's confined space than it had been in the grand throne room. Beside him stood the queen, her delicate elven features contrasting with the king's strong jawline and broader shoulders. To my surprise, I also saw the queen mother, her white robes shimmering slightly in the soft light of the room, creating an almost ethereal effect. And there, a comforting presence amidst the royal assembly, stood Ryyah, her familiar face a welcome sight in this unfamiliar setting. The king gestured to a chair in front of the desk.
"Please, sit,"
he said, his deep voice resonating in the small space. As I lowered myself into the chair, I couldn't help but notice the intensity of their gazes. The king's eyes, a striking blue-green that he shared with his mother, seemed to weigh me carefully. I steadied myself, trying to project a calm I didn't entirely feel. The king began with pleasantries, asking about my accommodations and my stay in the citadel. I recognized this for what it was, a test of my grasp of their language and customs. Drawing upon the lessons Ryyah had drilled into me over the past months, I responded with carefully selected words. "Your Majesty," I began, my voice steadier than I felt, "I am deeply grateful for the great generosity and hospitality you have shown me these past months. The accommodations have been more than fitting, and I appreciate the opportunity to learn and grow within your realm." I saw the king's expression soften slightly, and the tension in the room seemed to ease. A slight upturn of the queen's lips hinted at approval, while Ryyah gave a brief, approving nod. Encouraged by this positive reception, I continued, "The knowledge here exceeds anything I could have imagined. I only hope that I can, in some way, repay the kindness that has been shown to me." The king leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face.
"You speak our language well,"
he observed.
"Ryyah has taught you admirably."
I inclined my head towards my tutor. "I have been blessed with an exceptional teacher." The king nodded, then leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "Now," he said, his tone shifting to one of authority,
"I must ask you directly. Who are you, truly, and from where do you hail? For you have not the look of the humans of our world."
The room's tension eased, but a new weight settled in its place. I inhaled slowly, knowing that this moment of truth had been inevitable. Ryyah's advice echoed in my mind. Speak truthfully, for the king is wise and just. He will hear you out. Your Majesty, I began, my voice low but clear, what I am about to tell you may sound strange, even impossible, but I swear on my life that every word is true. And so, I detailed my story. I described Earth, a world both alien and familiar compared to Ryyah. I spoke of the night of the strange storm, the appearance of the black hole that had torn me from everything I knew. I recounted my time in the dimensional abyss, the maddening emptiness, the strange way I had survived without sustenance. As I spoke, I studied their expressions intently. The king's face was unreadable, but I saw the queen's eyes widen in surprise. The queen mother listened with an intensity that was almost palpable, while Carola's face showed a mix of concern and fascination. I concluded my tale with my arrival in their world, the disorienting experience of finding myself in the dwarven workshop. And that, Your Majesty, is how I came to be here. I know it sounds unbelievable, even to me, but it is the truth, every word of it. For a long moment after I finished speaking, silence reigned in the study. The king stroked his beard thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving my face. I held his gaze, willing him to see the honesty in my words. Finally, it was the queen mother who broke the silence.
It is as he says,
She said, her voice soft but carrying an undeniable authority.
He is not of this world. He is as much a victim of circumstance as any of us.
The king nodded slowly, then turned to me.
I believe you speak truthfully,
He said.
and I owe you an apology. The experiment that brought you here, it was conducted under my orders. We sought a way to travel great distances in the blink of an eye. We did not believe such a thing was truly possible, and yet we could not ignore the potential if it were. It seems our ambition has had unintended consequences.
He paused, his expression grave.
I'm sorry that you were brought here against your will, but I fear that you may be unable to return home. The event that brought you here was a freak accident, unlikely to be repeated.
His words sank in slowly, unable to return home. The realization settled over me, a weight that threatened to crush the air from my lungs. The king continued, his voice softening slightly.
Since it was my servants who are responsible for your misfortune, and they were operating under my orders, I will take accountability for this. I offer you a boon. Ask something of me, and if it is within my power, I shall grant it. You are welcome to remain in the palace as you find your bearings, but eventually you will need to make your own way in this world.
As the king's words hung in the air, a heavy silence descended upon the room. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the faces of those present, each lost in their own thoughts. I sat there, my mind reeling, trying to process the enormity of what I had just heard. The finality of my situation began to sink in, and with it came a cascade of emotions I struggled to contain. The Queen Mother's eyes, wise beyond measure, seemed to see right through me. She stepped forward, her white robes rustling softly against the stone floor.
Young one,
She said, her voice gentle yet firm.
I sense great turmoil within you, but know this, while one door has closed, many others have opened. You stand at the threshold of a new life, one filled with possibilities you have yet to imagine.
Her words, meant to comfort, only served to underscore the magnitude of my loss. I swallowed hard, fighting to maintain my composure. Thank you, Your Highness, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Your kindness is appreciated. The queen, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. Her voice was melodious, with an underlying strength that reminded me of the ancient trees I had read about in the library.
We understand this is a lot to process.
She said, her gaze filled with a mix of curiosity and compassion.
Take some time to consider the king's offer. Such a boon is not to be taken lightly.
I nodded, grateful for the reprieve. Thank you, Your Majesty. I will give it careful thought. The king rose from his seat, signaling the end of our meeting. As he did, I noticed a subtle shift in the room's energy. The formality that had permeated the air began to dissipate, replaced by something I couldn't quite name. A mix of curiosity, concern, and perhaps even a touch of excitement.
You have shown remarkable adaptability these past months.
The king said, his tone softer than before.
Continue to apply yourself as you have been, and I have no doubt you will find your place here in Ryyah.
As I stood to leave, Carla stepped forward.
If I may, Your Majesty,
She said, addressing the king but keeping her eyes on me.
I believe it would be beneficial for our lessons to continue. There is still much for him to learn about our world.
The king nodded his assent.
Of course. Your guidance has proven invaluable thus far. I trust you will continue to serve as his tutor and advisor.
There was something in the way he said advisor that caught my attention. But before I could dwell on it, Ingvar appeared at the door, ready to escort me back to my chambers. As I followed the dwarf through the winding corridors, my mind buzzed with unanswered questions. What would my future hold in this world? How would I make my way once I left the shelter of the palace? And what of the king's boon? What could I possibly ask for that would help me navigate this new reality? The cool night air hit my face as we passed an open window, the scent of distant forests and the faint sparkle of stars serving as a stark reminder of how far I was from home. Yet, as I walked, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation building within me. This world, with all its wonders and mysteries, was now my reality. And despite the loss and uncertainty, a part of me longed to explore it, to uncover its secrets, and find my place within its tapestry. Back in my chambers, I sank onto the bed, the events of the evening replaying in my mind. The king's words echoed in my thoughts. You will need to make your own way in this world. But how? In a realm of elves and magic, of ancient histories and complex politics, what place could there be for me? As I sat there lost in contemplation, a soft knock at my door startled me from my reverie. Who could be calling at this hour? With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, I rose to answer, wondering what new surprises this night might bring. I opened the door to find Adelwen, the princess, standing in the dimly lit corridor. Her copper-colored hair seemed to glow in the soft light of the wall sconces, and her blue-green eyes, so like her father's, were filled with a mix of curiosity and concern.
I hope I'm not disturbing you,
She said, her voice barely above a whisper.
I overheard what transpired in my father's study. I thought you might want to talk.
For a moment, I hesitated. Carola's warnings about court politics echoed in my mind, but the genuine concern in Adelwen's eyes made me reconsider. I stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. As she glided into the room, I couldn't help but notice the grace of her movements. She settled into a chair by the window, her gaze moving from me to the night sky beyond.
It must be overwhelming,
She said softly.
learning that you can't return home.
I nodded, sinking into the chair opposite her. It's a lot to process, I admitted. Everything I've known, everyone I've loved, they're all beyond my reach now. Adelwen's expression softened.
I can't imagine what you're going through, but I want you to know that you're not alone here. You've already made quite an impression on many in the court.
Her words surprised me. I have? She smiled, a gentle curve of her lips that seemed to brighten the room.
Indeed. Your quick mastery of our language, your eagerness to learn, it hasn't gone unnoticed. There are those who see great potential in you.
I felt a warmth spread through me at her words, a small comfort in the face of my recent loss. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. We talked for a while longer, Adelwen sharing stories of her own struggles with court life and the expectations placed upon her as a princess. As we spoke, I felt some of the tension that had been building within me start to ease. As the night grew late, Adelwen rose to leave. At the door, she paused, turning back to me.
Kevin,
She said, her use of my name sending a small thrill through me.
I know my father offered you a boon. If you'd like, I could help you consider your options. Sometimes an outside perspective can be valuable.
I nodded, grateful for her offer. I'd like that, I said. As she left, closing the door softly behind her, I turned back to the window. The 3 moons of Ryyah hung in the sky, their soft light casting a silvery glow over the sleeping city. For the first time since the king's revelation, I felt a small spark of hope. This world was now my home, for better or worse. And while the path ahead was uncertain, I was beginning to see that I wouldn't have to walk it alone. With a deep breath, I turned from the window and began to prepare for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and I was determined to face them head on.